Why, yes, this is an unconventional video, but I don't care. I've learned to write about what's interesting to me. So with that being said, Green Day. I can say without a doubt that they are my favorite band of all time. I've enjoyed their music for many years, but I've really only gotten into them until now. The Holiday remains to be one of my favorite songs even today, and American Idiot is, that's my favorite album of all time, no doubt. I love the high energy feel to the music, the catchy hooks. It always puts me in a good mood, and I like it even more when I'm already in a good mood. I feel that way about pop punk in general. I just enjoy the overall sound of it, and I know a lot of other people don't care for it, but whatever. The people that rag on more pop influenced rock are mainly folk who are into more traditional rock, which is understandable, but I still love it. But back to Green Day themselves. They're the one band that has remained good for a long period of time. Sure, they've had low points in their career, but it was nothing ever offensively bad, which is something you can't really say for other bands, some of which being younger than them. However, when they announced their new album, Father of All Mother, can't say that, I wasn't so sure if it was going to be all that great, but when the whole thing dropped a while ago, I was surprised. So let's go through this record track by track, starting with here we have the lead single, opener, and title track, Father of All. It was released on September 10th, 2019, and the response was mixed. The track itself is very fast-paced and is filled with some very tight instrumentals. However, the one thing holding it back for a lot of people is the vocals. There's a ton of filtering on his voice to the point where you can't really tell it's a Green Day song. Heck, I didn't even know it was one at first. Like, on its own, the vocal performance is fine, but it just sounds nothing like them. But I've grown to like the distorted vocals, honestly. As for the actual meaning of the song, it's pretty vague. Billy said it was about making people feel bad and just embracing craziness, but none of that really makes any sense when looking at the lyrics. The song is a decent length and is paced quite well. It's just a really catchy rock tune. What's interesting though is hearing it live. Billy will pitch his voice in a way he usually doesn't when performing. In some ways it's almost better than the album version. This next track isn't too great though. Fire Ready Aim is very lacking in substance. It doesn't even crack 2 minutes and it just feels empty. It's not bad, but it's very underwhelming. It didn't help that this was the second single off of this album either. Like, for the people that weren't a fan of Father of All, this probably didn't get them to look forward to the whole record. It's a pretty generic punk song, all things considered, but it's still decently catchy. However, it gets kind of old. The lyrics make absolutely no sense and are just kind of ridiculous. The track is supposed to be about someone's everyday problems and lashing out, but I don't see it. This track, while not offensively bad, it did make me unsure of where this album was headed in terms of quality. Hearing these more generic tunes coming from Green Day was a bit odd. But after thinking about it, some of the cuts off Dookie didn't crack 2 minutes either, and still felt fulfilling. Probably because of the more dense lyrics, so with that in mind, Fire Ready Aim has even less going for it. Luckily, they redeemed themselves with the third and final single released for Father of All is Oh Yeah. And if you think that's a dumb name, which it is, it was originally called Bulletproof Backpack instead, but was changed for some reason. This track is less headbang and more laid back, but it still has a very upbeat feel to it. It's just not as in-your-face as some of the other cuts off this record, which is perfectly fine, might I add. One thing about this track that stood out to me is the more traditional vocals. I was glad to hear Billy's voice more prominently here. In fact, I'd say this sounds like something from the trilogy, but, you know, the good songs off the trilogy, not that. The song has a very enjoyable sound and a good chorus, and the lyrics here make actual sense. It's basically a commentary about social media, and thankfully this comes across in the lyrics quite well. So those were all the singles, and honestly after hearing them I wasn't really sure what to expect from Fatherful, but I was still anticipating it and was curious to see how the deep cuts would fare. Fortunately, when I began to listen to the full album, I was greeted with "They Meet Me on the Roof" sucks. Plain and simple. It does not sound like a Green Day song at all. The sound has this glistening, sugary feel to it both instrumentally and vocally. It just sounds incredibly cheesy and a little too polished up. And the lyrics are equally so. The song is pretty laughable and really didn't need to be here. It honestly sounds like something I'd hear from a Disney Channel original movie. This is definitely my least favorite track on the album, and I doubt I'll ever come back to it. It's pretty bad. Luckily, the piss was washed out of my mouth with "I Was a Teenager." Oh, these names are terrible. I thought the song was pretty pleasant and had a really nice chorus, although it drags on for far too long, which is odd considering the fact that some of the better songs are too short. The song also just gets stale after a while. I don't have much to say about this one, it's just a decent tune. We then do a huge 180 in tone and quality with "Stab You in the Heart." This is super fun and fast-paced punk tune accompanied with some powerful percussion, angry vocals, and some really heavy instrumentals towards the end. The lyrics don't really say much from what I can tell, but it's still really good. Billy even lets out some nice screams here and there. It's really short though, only lasting about 2 minutes, which is a little disappointing. A lot of the more punk-influenced songs on this record are overly short, which is a shame. It gets even better with "Sugar Youth." This is honestly one of my favorite tracks on the record. It's super well paced and fills you with adrenaline. The lyrics are pretty well done. I'm pretty sure it's about like a lonely kid needing drugs to feel better. I always find it funny when a song can be really fun and upbeat while having lyrics about questionable topics. The band even calls back to "She's a Rebel" in the chorus, which I thought was a nice touch. I highly recommend giving this song a shot, but again, I just wish it was longer. I probably would have liked it even more if that was the case. But what's here is great, and I'll definitely be revisiting this one for a while. It's definitely a better short song than "Fire Ready Aim" since that song felt empty, but here, I think it works out. Next up we have "Junkies on High," which is a more experimental song, but it really worked out. While this isn't some marvelous headbanger, it's still really dang good and unique. It has a slower pace and a darker feel to it. I think the best part about this track is the instrumentals. I mean, just listen to this. The overall sound of this track is quite memorable and stands out from the others. It honestly got better with each listen. "Take the Money and Crawl," while a nice punk tune, I think suffers from similar issues as "Fire Ready Aim." It's repetitive and leaves a bit of an empty feeling after you listen to it. A kind of a in one ear, out the other kind of thing. I do really like the fast guitars and angry "I don't give up" vocals, but it just felt empty. I'd say I enjoy it more than "Fire Ready Aim," but that's probably because I'm writing this the day it came out, so it's more fresh, so make that of what you will. The album finishes off pretty strongly with "Graffitia." This track has a very upbeat tone despite the dark lyrics referencing the ghetto and the hardships that come with being there. It's a highlight for sure, and is one of the more fulfilling tracks here. It has a good length and feels solid overall. The song has a bit of an 80s rock feel, which is pretty cool and works out nicely. It almost seems like it was pulled from a more elaborate album, honestly. It's a more experimental track, but like Junkies on High, it succeeds in that regard. It just has a really powerful and uplifting sound without feeling forced. It's a really nice closer. So, those were the tracks, and I gotta say, this album was much better than I anticipated. Is it great? No, of course not. It's definitely one of their weaker entries in their discography. Most people point to the Uno, Dos, Tres trilogy as their worst effort. Based on the singles, I was worried that Father of All would end up being far worse and underwhelming, but I was pleasantly surprised. While I think Uno is better, the well-executed experimentation on the new record elevated it above the rest of the trilogy. I feel like if the songs were more fleshed out and paced well, then we would have something really dang good on our hands. Like I said before, the experimentation is really good here, except for Meet Me on the Roof. That song didn't need to exist. The band also did a decent job of taking influence from other styles of rock here with tracks like Graffitia. Another reason that I was surprised by my enjoyment was because of the rumors surrounding the album. Now all of this is pure speculation. It could be false or it could be true, but in my eyes it adds up pretty clearly. Basically, fans are thinking that this album is a troll to the label. Green Day has been with Warner since 1994 with the release of Dookie, and Father of All is their last one with them. They previously had issues with the label in regards to the trilogy. It was pretty hard for them to market 3 whole albums near each other, but they did anyway. The band has expressed their desire to release music independently, so I think they just wanted to get to their last record with Warner over with. And the songs were produced quite fast, and that shows since many of the songs are lacking in substance, all things considered. And then you have the ugly and slapped together album artwork that just screams I don't give a crap. I feel like the name was a huge troll as well, since they couldn't advertise it too well with the harsh language and all, though it is kind of funny when people have to censor it. There's also the fact that Billy is going on a tangent of I hate long songs and that he's tired of them or some crap. It doesn't seem genuine. In fact, the way this album is being promoted just doesn't seem quite right. During interviews, they don't really know what to say, and their answers sound pretty disingenuous. I think the band wanted to just cut loose, experiment, and make something weird. I try not to think of the album as a low-effort middle finger to the label, but more as a weird, dumb, offbeat experiment that really shouldn't be taken too seriously. They tried some new stuff, and I think it worked out most of the time. I doubt people will really hold this in high regard in the coming years. Granted, I'm not either, but I'm just glad it wasn't offensively bad. There's also the fact that they actually stuck with making punk rock music, considering how a lot of other rock bands have transitioned into pop, which really gets on my nerves. I do look forward to seeing what Green Day will do in the future if they go independent. There's been talk about a re-recording Warning, which could be neat, but it's not too necessary really. It's good as it is. All in all, I'd give this new record a listen, even if it isn't really their best.